I hope some morning. But so make sure you give him a call and get the other half of the story. But the story I heard was as she started out in the call center for International Harvester, she worked her way up. She was an art and journalism major, so she had drafting skills. She could see perspective. And she actually was promoted to be a draftsman in their engineering department. And there was a handsome draftsman down the way who kept coming over and bumming cigarettes off of her. And, you'll have to ask Dad for the rest of the story, but I'm told that as the girls have kind of gone through some of her stuff, she actually kept the lighter. So we've got some physical proof that the story actually is true for the genealogists in our midst here. So Dad was bumming cigarettes off of her, and something started to spark, and something started to happen, and next thing you know, here I am with my dad telling me that the reason he married my mom was because she put corn in her meatloaf. So the hard part growing up as a child was I always had that existential moment when I realized, but for a pack of cigarettes and a can of corn, I wouldn't even be here. It was, but then as I grew, as my faith developed, and I learned to see the providence in God, and for my friends here who are strong in the providence of God, it began to dawn on me, man, what God can do with a pack of cigarettes and a can of corn. You know, when you look at the lives that those two have changed, how God could take two strong people, two strong independent individuals, and push them together, and 58 years later, they have changed life after life after life. If you could know how busy I've been this week, because Nina touched so many people literally all over the world that I felt the need to notify them. And trying to do that was no small task. I'm so thankful to my friend Scott back here, because he kept telling me to take the time to do it, and I kept thinking it's not going to be much more. The next day, I spent the whole day, I was so busy, and people were so touched because she's touched their lives all over, literally over the world. But enough of that, we have to come back to younger years. And my dad's job, he worked helping design parts of aircraft. So if they needed a landing gear built in Seattle, we were packing up and moving to Seattle. Now, I actually have moments when I cannot remember finishing school in the same school that I started the school year in, because we moved so often. And when I think of my mom, what a trooper. What a trooper. And it goes both ways, and I'll tell you that in just a second. But I remember moving into Seattle, Washington, cold weather. I remember sitting on our suitcases with a cardboard box for a kitchen table. The milk outside the door so it could stay cold. And she was on for the ride. Now, it didn't stay that way long. I don't know, a year later or 9 months later, who knows what, we're headed for Atlanta, Georgia, Marietta, Georgia, from Seattle, Washington. We would end up in Maryland. We would end up in St. Louis. We would end up in Kansas. We'd end up back in Georgia. Then they would end up in San Antonio, Wichita, Montreal, Quebec, Ireland. So long story short, Dad went out and just out of necessity bought a moving van, an 18-wheel moving van. I mean, the Mayflower kind. He had it repainted so that we would pack it up, and we just parked it in the backyard. I kid you not. We parked it in the backyard so that when his next job came up, and he never told us, he'd just come home, it's time to go. And as soon as he'd go out and start the car, our dog would actually start to whine. The dog hated to move. But touched, literally as we moved all over the country, she was always on board, always on board. And one thing she did though, she liked to sew. And one of my memories is my dad, I won't say cursing because we're in the church here, so we have to be careful how we word this, grumbling under his breath as he loaded up. And when we packed the moving van, it was completely packed, clear to the top, clear to the back. I mean, we just shut the doors on the thing, and there was literally no air space in it. We just poked every hole full, because it was our whole house, everything we had, and we're moving it every year. But my mom held on to some things, and kind of like, she liked to keep a few things. So Dad probably put his stuff in the cab of the truck, and Mom, we loaded the rest of the truck, and now as we're going through this stuff, the girls are commenting to me, well, those were patterns from the 70s, or that's material from the 60s, or I remember those zippers when I was a little girl. And I'm thinking, yeah, my dad does too. Those zippers have been to Maryland, to Georgia, to Texas. Those zippers have been all over the world. And now we're trying to figure out who gets the zippers. We've still got them. So, what a wonderful woman. She loved to sew. She was a great cook. But I think the thing about my mom, that God gives us gifts. You know, there's some things that uniquely that you have that other people don't have, because God has given that to you. And my mom had an intellect. To say she was bright, I think, is an understatement. And it's kind of a curse to us as children, because she skipped 2 grades. They didn't just bump her up 1 grade. In school, they bumped her up 2 grades. So then here we are. She thinks, well, my kids are the smartest things ever, you know. They should get bumped up 2 grades. So, you know, I remember being in the 4th grade, getting moved into the 6th grade class because she'd been down to talk to the principal. and so I think intellectually I didn't have a problem with the school work. It's just that I couldn't adapt socially to 6th graders. I was so intimidated and so small. So it didn't work well. Finally, the school called her in and had a little talk with her, and I was able to be held back a little bit. But that's another hoot, because my mom always had this sense of fashion that was vogue. It was high fashion. She never lived. She lived on her own level. And so we moved to Kansas, to a farm in Kansas, and our family farm. And for those of you who are older who have seen the movie Green Acres, this is the closest thing to Green Acres I've ever seen. Because my mom was, you know, the English country woman, and we were talking about putting pillars on the front of the farm, and, you know, planting orchards, you know, just this grandiose thing, and Dad's out here in the, you know, filling manure spreader from the hog lot, and you know, and sometimes the pigs did get out. We actually had them in the house, you know. And talk about a hoot, what a wonderful upbringing. But even on the farm, in the midst of a Mennonite community, where people, she was a liberal because she wore makeup. You know, God forbid. And she, you know, had jewelry. She did wear some jewelry, not a lot, as you know. You knew her well, but she always was one of those women, you know, from out there, you know, from California, because and back then it was the company telephone. You remember? So when somebody picked up the telephone, everybody on the whole line could hear what was being talked about. And my grandpa would call, and he had a gold mine. So he would be telling her about the gold mine he was mining in Arizona, and about this and about that. And of course, you know, the phones are all getting hot in the whole community as he's telling this story. So here's my mom planted in the setting of this Mennonite community, and but she didn't really fit in. So us kids, when it came time for school, everyone else had on blue jeans, just normal blue jeans, and that would have been nice to just wear blue jeans. But I swear, I'm not sure I ever had a pair of blue jeans until I went to college. She would order red jeans, green jeans. I had brown jeans, rust-colored jeans, light blue jeans, but I never had just regular Levi's. So, we were always going to school, and my sisters can tell the same stories. Don't expect to fit in a strong family, because you're going to have a hard time. So, she was such a classic in some of those ways. But back to the point, she had the ability to understand and was an avid reader. We could take her a 500-page book, even in the last year. You took her a 500-page book today, and she was talking to you about it tomorrow. Read the whole thing, remembered everything. And if you could know the number of books that woman read, it is amazing. And she'd read a book a day just for fun, and it was incredible. And so when we were on the farm back in the 70s, like I said, we didn't even have our own phone for a while. There was no internet, there was nothing. She realized where the country was headed. And it's the neatest thing, and a lesson that she's left for me that I hold dear. She was so concerned that she would write to Washington. And so here we're out in the middle of rural Kansas, and we're getting these bills coming in from Washington, mailed in. She's reading them. She knows those things backward and forwards. We're hearing about it at the dinner table and listening to it all. Well, the next thing you know, she's talking downtown to the women's group and the professional women's group, and she's going over here and talking. Next thing we know, she decides to run for Congress. And I have remembrances of my youngest sister Clarissa, because she was captive. She was too young to say no. She couldn't do anything else. So she was in the front seat, and off they go. And to describe it to you, and this is her faith, this is her conviction. It was something like Chicago is to Illinois, Kansas City is to eastern Kansas. I mean, the population just rules the day. But everybody that lives outside of Kansas City is a totally different culture and thinks differently. So here my mom goes from town to town. It would be like, today she's in Brazil knocking doors. Knock, knock, knock. Here's what I believe in. What do you think? An actual exchange of ideas. And then she's off to Farmersburg, and then she's down to Linton, and then she decides to go to Orleans. I mean, it was unbelievable. And the cool part that you have to understand in this whole picture, in Kansas, and I suppose it's somewhat blended more now, I'm not sure, but to the far east there was a black town. When we played them in basketball, most of the people on the team were black. Now they were a town, they were farmers, they were businessmen, but it was basically black. And then the next section over was an Indian reservation. And when we played them in school, first of all, they were already jealous of our mascot because we were the Indians, but everybody on the team was Indian. And then when you came to our community, we're all cousins, right? We're all Mennonites, basically, most of us. We're all related, the teachers, the class, everybody on the team, we had to go out and hire a coach. We weren't have to bring a coach in, but basically we were all Mennonites. And then the next town over is German Catholic. They're all cousins, related, a common culture. And so my mom, regardless of culture, regardless of people, She'd go out and talk to anybody about her convictions, about her faith, about the need for the country. And I tell you, as a kid, I used to just poo-poo, oh, Mom, you're crazy, it can't get that bad. You know, no, humanism, it's not that. No, people will never fall for humanism. No, you know, and the school systems, they'll never know. And abortion, oh, Mom, you're just making too big of a deal out of this. And you know, I was always giving her some resistance, and now, when I look back, she was a prophet. Everything she said at the dinner table has come true. And her conviction that led her out, when she ran a deal with her, you knew what she was going to do. I mean, she was fearless. So, her courage, the initiative, the faith, the conviction, and I'll end with this point. The one thing that pulled it all together, and I go back to Thomas Jefferson, because Thomas Jefferson believed in the rights of the individual. Right? He wasn't Hamilton over here looking at the federal government. He believed in people, in rights, in freedom, and opportunity, and given the chance what people can do with their lives. And for her, that extended to the womb. That the child not yet born was a person with rights just like yours and mine, and somebody had to stand up for that unborn child. And she did. And then it eventually involved politics, and somebody had to stand up for that unborn child in the legislature. And when nobody did, she did. And that's what pulled her together, was her belief in every person. They don't care your background, color of your skin, what faith you have. And it seems to me today, I'm tired of the things that separate us. Let's get rid of the goofball doctrines we argue over. We're in a battle. If anybody represented or brought that battle right to the front, Nina was on the cutting edge. She was leading the charge. She would take the first step. And if you know her initiative for Ben Carson, I just put a plug in. Since she's not here to say it, I said, Ben Carson, right? If you love Nina Strom, put a vote in for Ben just in honor of Nina. Right? If we can just see her courage, her faith, conviction, and take the steps to live like she lived, what an honor. What an honor to her as we take it forward in our lives. But I've been kind of serious. And there's the funny side, there's the good side, and we have plenty of time to share a little bit. For those of you who knew her, she also, for as bright as she was, she could never pronounce words right. So, it was always, let's go out to Chick-a-filet, or Chick-a-Phil, or, she was creative finding ways to mispronounce words. I grew up thinking it was pizza. I was actually in college when I realized it was pizza. People started looking at me funny. Like, what's wrong? You have pizza. So, she was such a hoot the way she would pronounce her words. But I really do want to invite you, because I've shared my part of it, but you know a side of her that needs to be told, and this, everybody has a life. And we live that life in this world, and everybody's life is important. And there comes a day when we honor that life. And we need to stand up and do our part to say, yes, this is a celebration of a woman that deserves your words. And I would invite you to share right now. If you raise your hand, we have some microphones. You can stay in your seat, or if you feel comfortable, come up to the podium and share at that time.
So the guys were helping us when us cycle breakfast. Well, I stayed out there and worked. And one of the guys come out and tells me, kind of says, "Give me some breakfast." I'm like, "Nah, tell Rob, I don't want to eat. I'm doing some work." Oh, about 10 minutes later, the guy comes out and says, "Nana says, now, get ready to eat. There's no work until you eat." So that was my first real experience with that. Was never in politics, never cared about politics, but when she talked about politics, I was interested. And all her stories about Ronald Reagan, who I like, and it was pretty impressive. The last memory I have of her was the Friday night before she passed. We was at Mark's house for dinner. We got done watching a movie, and I got to take her home. And I walked her inside and gave her a hug and said, "I'll see you tomorrow." And not knowing what happened. For those of you who know me, I preach two things. One is brotherly love. I preach brotherly love, and Nina was that. I have a past, but she oversaw that past. She took me in and adopted me. Just seeing her with other people, how she loved other people, and that's what Jesus says. They know you've been with me by the way you love each other, and she was that. So she gave me the fleshly experience of the love and love. The second one I preach is endure to the end. You see the kingdom of God. And I always thought I knew what that meant until she passed. And then I found out she had cancer and all the other stories I heard. So Nadia she endured into the end. And so that phrase for me personally has a different outlook on. I am glad she's in heaven. I'm glad I can see her standing in front of God right now, her head down, crying, and I can see God reaching up her chin and says, "Child, you're home, quit crying." That's what I see by night. Do I miss her? But I'm glad she's gone. Glad she's not separate. So that's my memories of Nina. So anybody else, raise your hand, I give you the mic.
That woman was a great woman. She gave me some curtains, knock on my room. But this woman was so great. She owned you. And I loved her dearly. There's no other woman like her. And that's all I've got to say.
I would be remiss if I didn't say anything. I think I've known Nana less than any of you, but I met her through her wonderful husband, amen, which is a man of love, a man of integrity, a man of style, a hard-working man, a man that loves people, that people love. And his wife, I met her. She was a lovely, vivacious, gorgeous, attractive, witty, understanding, spiritual woman. And to know her was to love her. And I guess you really love people in order to go into politics, because the word poly means many and the word tick means bloodsucker. So to get around to express her points and her views to the many bloodsuckers and to have something viable and intelligent to say and to be looking ahead. She had hindsight, but she had foresight. And anybody can talk about things after the fact, but to think about things so hard that you understand what discipline is. And I'm going to sit down. Punishment is knowing what happened in the past, and now in the present, you're taking care of the situation. That's doing punishment. But discipline is that you know what happened in the past. You know what could happen if it continued. That's future. But you take a right now, present application. And she was a woman that took a right now, present application. And she could cook too. Amen. And I just love them, and we appreciate you. And Hal, we love you, appreciate you so much. You are friends. I tell you, that old man can hug. And he's not a senior citizen. Everybody say, he's not a senior citizen. He's a citizen with seniority. God bless you.
I want to stand up here because I want to read something. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. She brings him good, not harm, all the days of her life. She selects wool and flax and works with eager hands. She is like a merchant ship bringing her food from afar. She gives up while it's still dark. She provides food for her family, portions for her servant girls. She considers a field and buys it. Out of her earnings, she plants a vineyard. She sets about her work vigorously. Her arms are strong for her task. She sees that her trading is profitable and her lamp does not go out at night. In her hand she holds the distaff and grasps the spindle with her fingers. She opens her arms to the poor and extends her hands to the needy. When it snows, she has no fear for her household, for all of them are clothed in scarlet. She makes covering for her bed. She is clothed in fine linen and purple. Her husband is respected at the city gate, and where he takes his seat among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments, sells them, and supplies the merchants with sashes. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh all the days. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but you surpass them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting. But a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Back in the mid-'80s, most of you know I was coming out of a rehab center, drug rehab. A guy that was in there, he comes running up to me. He says, Graham, you got to go to this Bible study. I said, okay, where is it? So I go. This gray-haired man met me at the door and hugged me. I walk in. The living room is basically empty, void of any furniture. You go to the left, and then you go back to the left, and there was a kitchen. Nina's in there cooking. And lo and behold, there's Janice in the corner helping out. Any given Monday night, we'd have 70-plus young people. She would cook a meal for those people every Monday night. And here's the remarkable thing. She never complained about it. She loved it. It was her way of giving back to the kingdom. And to know Nina is to know someone very, very special.
forgive me for referring to some notes, but beforehand, picking up on a couple of things that have been said. There's a saying that the greatest of loves are the merest of chance. And I just came to the realization, hearing Mark, that if it wasn't for a can of corn and a pack of cigarettes, I wouldn't be here. My name is Jerry Burnberry, and Nina and I have many things in common, including our love of history and politics. I want to assure you one thing. In my conversation with her, Hal was always in the background. He was usually preparing or conducting a Bible study class when she and I did. Also, I want to tell you that about a year or so ago, I'm on, just as an aside, I'm on the 4th Congressional District Executive Committee in the state of Georgia. And given my interest and role in politics, Nina was always willing to provide me advice. And at one point she asked me, she said, "Do you know about Ben Carson?" I said, "Yes, I've already made a contribution." I've been asked to speak about Nina from a family history perspective. Notice that I'm trying to refrain from using the word genealogy because I don't want her grandchildren to get up and leave. Indeed, Nina was a very precious wife, mother, grandmother, and sister in Christ. She was a pillar in your church and in this community, as well as a world traveler now. She was all these things and still more. To me, she was a dear cousin, friend, and fellow family tree climber on what is a endless, daunting task as you go back through time. You see, the search for one's ancestors is complicated by the fact that you have 4 grandparents. That's easy. 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents, 32 great-great-grandparents, and it goes back on from there through the endless tide of time and generations. Tracing one's ancestors requires several attributes, all of which Nina possessed to the nth degree. First, she loved history, as evidenced by the library and the well-read books, histories, with obscure titles about forgotten places and times that she accumulated. Second, Nina had the sharply honed skills and perseverance of a detective, puzzling through bits and pieces of information that unfortunately sometimes led to dead ends for both of us. As in life, with her battle with illness, she always faced adversity with an enthusiasm and determination, never lamenting the fact that a particular county courthouse had burned down years ago, destroying all of the records, both to our mutual dismay. In addition, Nina willingly shared her findings in her own time with me and others, often foregoing her own research in order to help others on unrelated lines. I last spoke to Nina, I think it was on Thanksgiving Day, and last week, as a matter of fact. Her last email to me was about a particular ancestor that she was not related to, but I was trying to research. She said, have you looked at this? That is one email that will be deleted. I'll try to forward it. Okay. In addition, she was able to tell others about the lives and times of not to be forgotten individuals in a manner that aroused their interest of the listeners, compelling them, in some instances, to try to seek out their own ancestors. My own trek back in time began when I was in college, over 50 years ago, researching a graduate paper on Jacksonian democracy. My paper was on the Treaty of Indian Springs, where a small group of Cherokees, who were not the lawful representatives of the tribe, ceded the nation's lands to the state of Georgia. The Cherokee Nation took the matter all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, which agreed that the so-called treaty was invalid. However, President Andrew Jackson, being the friend of the frontiersmen, refused to enforce the treaty, creating a constitutional crisis, about which my paper was on, that ultimately led to the removal of the Cherokees along the well-known Trail of Tears. While researching the paper, I stumbled across a book entitled The Land Lottery of Georgia of 1827, which identified the white settlers to whom the Cherokee lands were rented. Curious by nature, like all history buffs, I discovered an individual named Matthias Greenberg, who drew 320 acres of land in that particular lottery. It took me 5 years to establish that the same Matthias Greenberg, after marrying Elizabeth Minton, which is a dead end, in 1827 eventually settled in Texas with their 6 sons and 1 daughter. Their youngest son, George Anderson Greenberg, was my great-grandfather, and their only daughter, Mary, who married Robert Beard, was her great-grandmother. Thus, I've explained Ninus and my connection. As you can see, family history, not genealogy, is about storytelling based on factual data, which includes delving into our nation's past as a backdrop, like the Treaty of Indian Springs, for the bits and pieces of information that we unearthed in trying to establish more than the dates of birth, death, and so forth, marriage, for individuals to really find out about their lives and the times that they lived in. A truly passionate and tireless researcher, Nina possessed a treasure trove of stories about her roots intertwined with contemporary events. She also took great pride in the fact that she was descended from the first Swedish family, as I and many of you were, to settle in America 14 generations or 376 years ago, and that was Mons Anderson, his wife Britta, and the young daughter Britta, from whom we are descended. Although it's hard for a Texan to be brief, I am a born Texan, I won't burden you further about our common research efforts over the years except to correct one false impression. One of the cardinal rules, and I'll have to use the word genealogy, is you never discuss politics, religion, or living relatives with other genealogists, only distant deceased ancestors. Sharing the same Christian and conservative values Nina and I often talk about all four. Therefore, I know that she would be delighted that I'm now visiting along with my son her place of worship, and that I'm also able to put faces to many of the children and grandchildren that she and I so often talk about. I loved her dearly, and will miss her very, very much. And I'd like to just close just extemporaneously with a few words from a poem called Thanatopsis. Into my heart's treasury, I have slipped a coin, which time cannot take, nor defeat roll away. Oh, greater than the minting of a gold-crowned king is the safe-kept memory of a lovely thing. I love your dear.
I have a funny story that I'll always remember about Grandma. Our family knows it as the deep fryer story. Last year, Grandma had gotten an ad from Macy's, which was her favorite store, and she had seen that they had a deep fryer on sale. And she decided that she needed this deep fryer. And so she would bring it up every time our family was over, just very nonchalantly, hoping that we would take her to get it. And we all knew what she was up to. So everyone just avoided taking her to Macy's. So one day, she needed socks from Macy's. So I get her in the car and we drive there and we buy her socks. And you know, she has her Parkinson's, so I carry her purse for her most of the time. And once we're ready to leave, she says, wait just a minute. I want to go look at the sale items just to see what they have. And so we get over there and she picks up this deep fryer and she's like, okay, let's go. And I say, Grandma, I can't let you buy this deep fryer. It's too dangerous. And she looks at me with these puppy dog eyes with this glint in her eye. She's like, I want this. And I look at her and I'm just feeling so horrible, but I look her in the eye, I say, I'm holding your purse, I have your wallet, we're not buying the deep fryer. She was so sad and I felt so horrible. And then a couple months later, I hear that she has gotten my grandpa to take her to Macy's to buy this deep fryer. And she told all of my family, don't tell Morgan.
Public speaking is not my forte, I'll let you know now, but I do have one memory of her that I will never forget, and it's made a lasting impression on me. As Mark already mentioned, I was often held captive and taken on her political trips, and it's one of those trips I remember she was invited to discuss, well, actually it was supposed to be a debate of the Equal Rights Amendment. And it was in Topeka, and we went. It was a very large auditorium, a lot of women there. And these women were of various unnatural orientations. Lots of them you couldn't tell whether they were male or female. And it was a setup, basically. There was no debate. They literally set out to destroy her. And as a child, I was a child, I had to sit and watch this. And I had women, I went in the hallway after a while, and a woman came up to me and I said, I'm really sorry you have to watch us destroy your mom, but it needed to be done. And I will never forget that. I will never forget her courage. It reminded me of Paul going into cities as an apostle. Didn't know if he was going to come out alive, you know, the way people treated him, and he kept going. Excuse me. And when we came, she held her own. She was that strong. It was amazing. And we got to the car. She was holding herself together. We got in the car, shut the door. She bent her head, stopped, put her head back up with strength, turned the car on, and we went. And she did that repeatedly. I mean, she was sometimes the only vote against everyone else. And she had her reasons for it. And her strength is something that I will cherish. I'm not naturally born with a lot of personal strength, but I think that watching her through the years, I see it, the effects of that coming out in me, and I hopefully will teach that to my children. But that was an amazing thing.
Coming up here because I can't hold my notes and a mic at the same time. So, how many of you have seen Up? My mom is the woman in those first 10 minutes of Up. That is the woman that I knew growing up. It was her. The mom I remember is not the same woman that you knew. And like Clarissa and Mark have told, she was an adventure. Her life has been an adventure from the start, and we always felt like we were living part of the adventure. And she made it so exciting and so fun for us. She was an amazing person. My mom didn't live a life of rules. You know, I hear other kids say, and even adults say, oh, we have these family rules. You had to do this, you had to do this, you had to do that. That wasn't my mom. My mom lived a life of principle. Should we have done it? Why should we do this? What would cause someone to do this? What is called in light of this, what should we do based on principle? And so we grew up thinking of that, but not in terms of the actual rules. And this established a guideline for our lives. So what were those guidelines and what did she measure us? What did she measure by? Well, one was the Bible. Anyone want to guess the second? It was the Constitution. Those were her compass points. Was it biblical? Was it legal? Would it further the population, would it further America, what America wanted to do? So we never lived in this little cocoon that some families live in, never looking out to see what other families do or what other countries do, what other states can. We grew up in a large environment of the world and what Christians should do and the impact that we should have on the world. And from the time I've been very small, that's the world that I've grown up in. My mom never wavered in her faith. Her Bible was her compass, and she never wavered. I never saw her waver. Ever. And I don't know if any of you.
Amen.
Yeah, she never did. In times of adversity, and there were tough times, family times, community times, times like Clarissa told, I can't look at my family. She never wavered. And she always credited God with bringing her through. And in times of triumph, when other people would crow about what they did, guess what my mom did? She gave credit to God. I never once heard her brag about what she did. She would tell you she never did it by herself. She never did it herself. It was always by the grace of God. That's who she was. My mom knew her Bible, and she knew the Constitution. And I remember one time as a child, we were in Sabetha, Kansas, at this little church in town, and we had these preachers coming to try out, and they would come and give their sermons, and they would leave in hopes of getting